All right, guys, welcome back to Freedom Formula, where we are going to jump into part two here with George. If you listen to part one, you know George has a background in understanding law, and he wasn't actually a lawyer, but he could probably make a great lawyer. Worked at EY for some time, and actually is also a CPA. So if you don't know those details, go watch that episode. That way, you have some more context for what we're about to break down here. But if you have watched it, the thing we're going to start talking about is some tactical and practical items that you guys can leverage leading your businesses, but really focusing on the mindset shifts at hand. And as we've spoken about before, your mind is such a big and great controller of what you do on a daily basis that making sure you can control that, you can get over some of those blocks is going to be key. So George, again, welcome. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Wealth of knowledge so far, and excited to dive into kind of this side of things with you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So there's a little bit of a journey here on the mindsets. So as I mentioned before, I was a leader and had a lot of folks to team with and work with, and had to do a lot of counseling and coaching. Actually, all my Saturday mornings, I'd spend hours walking my dog and on the phone with, as time zones change, I'd catch people in their early mornings wherever they lived, and at that time, I started taking a course on meditation and mindfulness. And I found it very intriguing. That's where the whole mindset shift started with me. Is meditation and mindfulness is about, calming your mind, getting out of your amygdala, and understanding that there's other choices you can make. And for your own personal well-being. And I started seeing a bridge to carry that into business. So I started thinking of all the kinds of stresses I was dealing with. And usually is around people resisting change. And our minds are programmed, our subconscious mind, we're biologically predisposed to resist change. And so I created a module around embracing change. And I thought, no matter what you did, your change program methodology, the cost of status quo, what's the visioning of the future, anticipating challenges, all that, so what? If someone's brain doesn't want to hear that, there's a Heisman going up, it doesn't matter. That's why, like Harvard said, HBR said, 83% of corporate transformations fail. And in my mind, it's because people are walking in with their autopilot brain and they're resisting change.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go through all unpacking that. But then the next one was ups and downs of business, layoff anxiety. And we all are built to worry, right? We have a negativity bias. And so many people are afraid of, being laid off or not getting that promotion. And then the next one was public speaking. And then how many calls I had with a coworker going around you, or being undermined by a colleague, or people missing deadlines. But so all those were, when I unpacked them, all were mindsets that we have inbred in us that are natural. I call it our subconscious brain, our biases. If we do nothing about it, are going to lead us down a path of worry, less sleep, anxiety. I'm even starting to sweat a little bit thinking of all those issues, right? What I found is, with a simple mindset shift, we don't need, and I liked what you had, you don't need big programs and big methodologies. Your thinking is just get out there and do it. What if, instead of a big change program, what if people showed up to work saying, I know this change is happening. I know my default is going to become nervous about it, but I understand that the only constant in life is change. And whenever we attach to something in the changing world, we're going to suffer. And more times than not, that attachment was, I have a job, I have a role, I'm known for something, people come to me, I'm sought after, I'm good at this. And this change is going to change that whole world. And I'm going to have to redefine myself. And can I? And that attachment is what causes the resistance. And I think once you unpack that and understand that, you can then say, okay, I'm not going to allow this attachment. I'm going to go look at the change. And I understand that there's a negativity bias we're all um, born with, and that when we look at facts, typically the old me would look at and gather any fact that would build my case to resist change. And now I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to look at all facts and not be in a negative mindset when I review them. One example of one mindset shift in business, but what I started unpacking all these instances and came up with solutions for people to flip the switch and within 10 minutes start thinking differently, cognitive reframing, looking at it, taking a different perspective. um, and if you define them ahead of time, then oh, I remember that one. I'm worried about layoff, or I have to give a presentation, or yeah, someone just went to the boss and I know they're talking about me. How do I address it? You can Don't let your subconscious drive your behavior, because it's going to lead to frustration, lashing out, maybe retaliation. But take a pause and have a new way of doing that. So I started doing these mindset shifts, and then and that was around the anxiety at work. But then I started looking at, well, I have a business strategy, and what kind of impediments or mindsets might be impeding the execution of that business strategy. And so I started working with a law firm, and there was some set mindsets that lawyers have. But then, I came up with a list for entrepreneurs that out of the gate, as you're starting a business and you're going out and working, how is your brain wired to think about, you addressing your business, and is that going to serve you well? And I don't know, Steve, if you want, I can kind of go through some examples of where our default mindsets maybe aren't the best for being an entrepreneur, and maybe we can course correct.
Yeah, I think I'm going to throw a quick example maybe your way. And it's just recency going on, because I literally had conversations yesterday and today about it. And then maybe go from there, use it or not. But I have a client that I just completed an audit with, and they're doing well into 7 figures a year of top line revenue. I would say actually low 8 figures at this point. And things are, outside in good, but they're just stuck. They haven't grown their business in about 2 years. And they're unable to figure out why, and they just keep pouring more and more money into marketing, and marketing is getting more and more expensive. And through the audit, I basically went through, and the biggest thing that I found in their business was their churn, their attrition number was actually being tracked incorrectly and being massively underreported, to the tune of their actual attrition is sitting about 18.49% per month. So their average consumer is sticking around for about 5.4 months. And when I look back at during their high growth years, their attrition was sitting around 3.8 to 4.1% per month, which
Mm-hmm.
means they've just almost 5x'd what their attrition is. And I brought that up, and the initial response from pretty much everybody was, "Oh, well, no, those numbers can't be right." And I was like, "Hey, it is very possible. Like, I'm new into the business, learning where to click, what reports to run, trying to understand terminology. Very, very possible. In fact, very probable. Just help me understand where it's wrong." And as we kept going through, it was this, "Oh, well, I guess that's right. Oh, well, I guess that's right as well." We went through, I think, 6 or 7 different spots that we identified as, oh no, the numbers were generally good. And I think the final number I came up with was like an 18.57. So it actually got like 0.08% worse once we confirmed everything. And she still sat there and said, "I just don't think that this is our biggest problem. What does it matter?" And I had to explain how, your business has a capacity that it can perform at, but it also has a ceiling at which your acquisition and your churn basically level out, and you really can't break through that. And no matter what, you can never grow above that unless you just really over index on charging more for services, or just massively turning up your acquisition efforts. Still, at the end of that, it was this big, "I don't think that's the biggest issue. We just need to get more efficient over here." So there was more to it. And we've since, over a 2-day period, started to kind of come to grips with, oh, that actually is a big problem. But I guess in that context, and again, just recency for me, how would you take that mindset thing of like, hey, what's a thing we might approach that conversation with? And again, if this is a bad example, feel free to insert your own example because I know you come prepared with some of those stories.
Yeah, so a few things kind of ran through my mind without knowing the specifics. But I've run into that fact pattern quite a bit. And um, so people have launched a successful program, they have clients, they're servicing it, and they had their idea of what they're solving for the world or the market. And um, you're bought into that, it's working in the, there's an old saying, um, what brought you here isn't going to take you to where you need to go. And so when I had these issues come to me, um, that was the first thing I looked at is what kind, what people and what mindsets brought me to where we are, but where we want to go, we may need to add new thinking, new perspectives, new people, and join more people in. Usually, I found that it's horizontal integration. Like what else is involved in this process, but that I'll put that in the parking lot. I think there's a mindset from controlling. There's a person that wants to control and not be open and adaptive, right? And so they're being defensive, and there's a fine tuning switch of saying, what can we learn here? To go from I got a problem to I have an opportunity. And I think that mindset shift from, let's just say, for example, we have a churn problem and not debate it. Um, let's look and see what opportunities, what possibilities could come from this. Let's unpack it. Let's see why people are leaving instead of debating on whether they're leaving at what percentage points. Instead of having a problem, I now got an opportunity, and that opportunity, is finding why clients are leaving or what more you can do to keep them or get referrals. And the second mindset shift is from control to collaboration, controlling mentality to collaborating, and maybe even collaborating with clients and customers to co-create with the customers what kind of value add or scale or other things that they're looking for, in here. So when we had these problems, you can say, oh, we petered out, and it's the Peter principle. We got as good as we can go. Or, what I would do, I'd get them off site. I'd get the right people in the room, and we would brainstorm, and then people that had good relations with clients would have their opinion and see, what the upside is and what the opportunity is, and where we can go. And then it's having a different mindset. It's going from controlling to collaboration and from problems to opportunity framing.
Yeah, I like that. And it's we have the problem. Okay, great. We need to find the opportunities that we can solve here because there's clearly an opportunity on the other side of that problem wall. And how do we just kind of, instead of having to worry about just controlling that specific issue, how do we create a collaboration to go ultimately solve it and whatnot? So I definitely love that. So
Yeah, and
um,
then just to build on that, the other word I used was chameleon, adaptive thinking. So, fixed thinking, we got it, we're good, the numbers are wrong, to adaptive, you know, everything I've seen successful is a chameleon. Um, there is nothing great I saw built in our practice that didn't evolve because of being a chameleon. And we learned and we grew. And even though we had great starts, there was always like competition caught up. The clients built it themselves or something. You had to keep being a chameleon and adaptive and growing.
yeah.
I don't think there's any business models out there that said we're going to pound the table and keep hammering the nail, and that's going to bring tremendous success.
Blockbuster, I think, did that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think
So
Blockbuster's
and again, I'm throwing it out there, but those are some subtle mindset shifts I see, that come into play there, and sometimes if you just get people to think, Because what happens is I found the root cause to everything is resisting change and discerning change. And when this person was discerning the numbers, we our subconscious has a negativity bias, so we start looking for things that build our case to put it down
Yeah.
instead of, Adam Grant has a book, Think Again, and I love his thinking in his book. Adam Grant is would be better off being like a scientist. And what a scientist tries to do is disprove why we think that number is right and try to do everything to prove the number is wrong. We need to reverse engineer everything we've kind of thought today and try to have a scientist when they look at things, we're conditioned to think a certain way. No, let's condition to challenge it and see why our thinking is wrong, and what else there could be. I think we're just that in that age, in our progression in business, that we have to like think again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. So, you got to do some fun work. You mentioned M&A and working through some of that and whatnot, and understanding kind of the legal side. And I'm sure you can read a P&L and a balance sheet pretty well, and all those components. But when a business owner or business leader is maybe facing stagnation or maybe just a retraction or something that's, call it, not positive, what does that conversation typically look like, or what is some conversation that this person potentially should start having with themselves? And I relate it to, obviously, my keyword is freedom, and that F is filter. So I've gone down this road of filter is really, it's code word for the profit per acquisition formula. And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically a way to operationalize all of the KPIs, because we've all stood in front of that Excel sheet, that Google sheet that has a bunch of numbers, or that whiteboard with a bunch of numbers, and we're not sure how important, how not important, how insignificant, how impactful any of those numbers are, because they're just all there in the way that our brain put them up. And profit per acquisition is a way to simplify and understand what we should be focusing on. It's lifetime value minus cost to acquire minus cost to fulfill. That value minus acquisition minus fulfillment then tells us, well, here's the profit every time we acquire a consumer. And if we look at just those three numbers, it's usually pretty glaringly obvious which one has the most opportunity, is the most broken, will be the easiest to influence, whatever the frame might be. And we can now just kind of put those horse blinders on of, wow, my cost to acquire is just way too high. You ask a simple question, well, what goes into cost to acquire? How much we spent and how many people we
Mm-hmm.
acquired. Okay. Push everything else out. Which one's the most broken, easiest to influence, whatever the frame is? And, well, we didn't spend more than normal. We just acquired way less people. All right, great. What goes into how many we acquired? Your leads and your conversions and your all that stuff. And you just continue that process until there's no longer a number that goes into the number that's the problem or the opportunity. And now, what are the solutions that we can deploy to fix this number and move it in the right direction? And it's just a way to diagnose what I have to be focusing on. Now, when I talk to people, it's always like, oh, well, and we always have our emotional connection to the business, and I know what I need to do. And sadly, that's usually not the thing that's the most important, because you're just connected. But like, in your mind, as this person is facing that obstacle, what does that conversation typically look like? And what's maybe a mindset shift that somebody can walk away with going, oh, this is a good way for me to solve that?
Yeah. So just to riff off what you said, in my career, we had a lot of different service offerings, that had revenue. We had a cost to deliver, and we had a profit. And what I found, and the mindset I had, was that revenue is going to decrease, and that cost is going to have to decrease, and to maintain that profit. So whenever we became good at something, and that's something, the other mindset I think is really important is to do what others don't do. Do what the clients don't do, or do what, don't do what clients do. Don't have something that clients don't have themselves, or, you know, don't do what your competitors do. Try to find something different, a little nuanced the way you deliver it, or even a totally different solution. And I always thought, would never go into a business replicating what someone else is doing and thinking I'm going to do it better, especially if I'm coming in second. So is there a different value, value I can bring, or a different service in totality? And then even when I got in there, then, the mindset was the first time, I did a global carve out acquisition, say 70 countries, and someone's buying a business unit carve out. We had very high revenue, and the cost to deliver it was very high, bringing consultants in across the world. When I looked 2 years later, we were only getting 50% of the revenue, and we had to deliver it in half the cost. And, because clients didn't want to pay that high cost, and, your competition starts ramping up and seeing it. And what I found is that, to get the cost down, we had to bring in technology and repeatable processes to have tech-enabled solutions do the work. It wasn't AI back then, but we had a lot of tools we used. And, the people we brought in, we needed a lot fewer people by tech enablement. And then we trained people and educated them. So it wasn't their first rodeo. And by the time they're in the second or third one, your cost to deliver took less hours and times with technology. So when the revenue went down, then the cost went down, our profit stayed the same. Then the flywheel effect was, well, can you build your brand so that instead of doing 5, you could do 10 or 15 a year, right? And then now you start focusing on, marketing efforts to get more reps. But those are just some mindset shifts in the journey. Was, we just couldn't sit on one good job. We knew that we'd have to work to become more efficient, get more reps, and add technology enablement to it. It's very clear.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think technology enablement there, obviously today, AI agents, things like that is similar premise. Some might argue AI is going to absolutely replace a bunch of people and things like that. And I think it'll replace people that don't use AI only, but not necessarily people who are using it. And it's also not an excuse to do less work. It's a reason to get more done with the same amount of time per se. But just integrating those things into the business to become ultimately more efficient. So
Yeah. And a lot of those AI tools, this was an interesting mindset shift we had too, was this word called repurpose. So just think, in 5 years, we had 300 new partners come on board, and that's a lot, and that's a big deal. And each partner had about 10 people, so that's 3,000 people. When we brought on 300 new partners, when I look at the great things we did with innovation, we repurpose people. So I can't think of a single person that, if they did, computer programming in their old job, in our new job, they're building some crazy analytical tool. So we repurposed people. And what I found is that, folks want a career trajectory. You want to hire the folks that want a career trajectory, the people that want to innovate, do something different. And there's this saying where when someone shows up to work, you probably get about 60% of their effort. And I think when you have a purpose that you're all aligned to, and our purpose was to put our fingerprint on the future of work, and a lot of people like that idea. And with that, when you came over, we're going to put you into something new and exciting and different and innovative and repurpose you. You're not going to do your old job again, but we're going to put you with other people and ask you to be that chameleon. That repurposing mindset was I think we got people to 110%. I
Yeah.
seriously do. I think they were more than happy to deliver on the day job, but super excited, to go over and above, to collaborate, and to work with others to innovate. And one thing was really important, and I don't know if that you call this a mindset, but was trust. They had to know you had their back.
Yep.
Not every one of these portfolio service opportunities grew, and I think having psychological safety was so important that I probably to a fault defended people, and they knew I had their back, so that they let go of that anticipatory anxiety of failure, and they were able to pursue and work and go forward. So yeah, all these are kind of mindsets that were built in to drive incredible innovation, incredible growth, and to just unleash people. And there was like a formula. It was if you can create trust, and we did a lot of offsites to do that. Um, Trust then enabled people to cooperate and collective collaboration, they'll then work together, and then when people work together you got the innovation.
Yeah.
And I always had this saying of those three things, the human species is the only species on the planet that can create trust through advanced communication skills, and we're the only species on the planet that can create collective cooperation between thousands and millions of people. Um, and we're the only species on the planet that can think in fiction and innovate. And so let's just take advantage of that. And so trust was the lead domino, got people to cooperate, got to be innovative. And then, I use the word compassion. If you saw someone not doing well, there was an urge to help them and defend them and give them safety. So that's kind of was a formula that seemed to work really well.
Love it. Love it. Well, George, this has been great. If somebody wants to connect with you, learn more about you, where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so we have a website, and it's called Simpatico, Simpatico, simpaticoadvisory.com. And all our contact information is on there.
All right, great. Well, George, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. I learned a lot. I know everybody listening is going to learn a lot. For those of you watching, go follow George. Go find more out about Simpatico, and just understand. And just every day you wake up and you start heading to work, just think: is there a mindset shift that I could be making that will produce a better outcome for my day, my week, my year, and everything that I'm working on at this point in time? So, again, thank you guys for coming. George, thank you for hanging out.
All right, Steve, thank you. It was great.